Everyone's starting to roll in. Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Anderson. I'm a VP Attack at Eagle. Also on today from Eagle, we've got Anthony Schweitzer. Say hi, Anthony. Anthony's going to be handling the Q&A and doing the most important part, the Kahoot and giveaway. So thank you, Anthony. He thought of the questions as well. So if you don't like the questions, you can direct that towards Anthony.
I try to make them really hard. Just to really challenge you guys. I know you guys are smart. You listen well. So
yeah, make sure you click fast. I've seen the questions. Yes. And then the guy doing the heavy lifting today, I practiced his last name, so I think I'm going to nail this. Kyle Aromi. Did I get it? All right. Yeah. So he's the sales engineering director for Qumulo. So he knows this stuff. We're really excited about the content today. I think I've blathered on long enough that we've got most of our attendees. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, the agenda's pretty straightforward. I'm going to blather just a little bit more about Eagle, and then I'm going to do a section that we affectionately call Stealing Kyle's Thunder. So before he gets a chance to talk about Qumulo, we're going to reinforce why Anthony and I love Qumulo so much. And then we're going to hand it over to Kyle. He's going to do an overview. And there's some cool roadmap and futures that he will discuss in code because they're really not public knowledge yet, but we think you guys will do a good job of reading between the lines and you'll get excited about that. I used to joke about 10 years ago that I wanted to go back to the days of a bunch of physical servers where they all had just one app. And of course I was joking, but what I meant by that is that with virtualization, everything improved, but it also got more complicated. And now instead of just losing a server in one app, you risk losing your whole data center. Well, I think a more timely version of that is I want to go back to a day where I just worry about SAN failures. Now we live in an era where actual nation state hackers and sophisticated agencies are targeting our IT infrastructure and even want to hold it ransom. And of course, with their sophistication and their money, it's almost an inevitability that you're going to suffer a breach and an outage to some extent at some point. So that's really what's caused a lot of folks to talk about defense in depth. But at Eagle, we like to talk just as much about recovery in depth, the notion that you need to have multiple ways to recover your data and fast. And what we talk a lot about internally is the notion that that requires design in depth, right? It's the notion that you can't just architect and sell individual widgets, right? And do that in a silo anymore. Internally, we always like to talk that every solution you choose and even every setting that you may change in an application is an opportunity to improve or degrade not only your security posture, but your recoverability. So that's how we operate at Eagle. I hope you guys notice and appreciate it. It's why sometimes we may be a little annoying and try to convince you to put a $40 TPM chipset in your new host servers. But I just wanted to peel back the curtain a little bit and talk about how we think internally at Eagle. So my next slide, it was once again titled tongue-in-cheek, Stealing Kyle's Thunder. But Anthony and I felt pretty strongly about this. We're both huge fans of Qumulo, and we just wanted to take a moment before Kyle started talking to kind of talk through that. So on my last slide, I didn't talk about it, but I had a bullet on how important customer support is. And I can confidently say that Qumulo has the best support of any vendor that we work with right now in the industry. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think my best example is the fact that every new Qumulo customer gets a dedicated Slack channel. So not only does support at Qumulo have access to that, but sustaining and engineering, their architects have access to that, and so does Eagle. And what's great about it is it completely eliminates the barriers to asking simple questions. You simply just bring up a web page or you open up an app on your phone and you're talking to guys that you get to know by name, you get to know their personalities. And of course, when you're more comfortable with a solution, it's going to be more successful. You're going to be happier. It's a really great mousetrap. And similar to some of the things we used to say about Nimble 8 years ago, they also have fantastic telemetry. I've got a couple of examples of that over on the right. So it's very easy to go in and see high level data as well as dig down and see exactly what's happening, even to individual files. So another thing, apparently I'm an old grumpy man that I complain about nowadays, is the fact that 8 years ago, we used to spend a lot of time talking about the architecture of a solution, how it worked, why it was fast, or why it had low latency. Nowadays, most of our vendors just like to talk in an outcomes-based methodology where they just try to tell you that you're going to get what you want and hope that you accept it, right? Well, we all know that the devil is in the details, and I'm happy to say that the architecture behind Qumulo is really impressive. While they do sell real fancy all NVMe nodes, the majority of our customers use hybrid nodes with spinning disk, for the economics of it. And the performance on those things is amazing. Low latency, really high throughput, and I think more importantly, really consistent. So customers just don't have anything to complain about. And once again, when they do have a question, they have really simple access to support. The other thing that kind of surprised me, I'll be honest, is when we first started evaluating Qumulo, we're talking many years ago, we were really kind of unfocused on the unstructured file use case. It was the idea that if 70% of your files are unstructured files, well, if we could put that on a Qumulo, then maybe you could afford an all-flash array for all that random IA workload data. But as we've grown our customer base, we've seen there's a lot of other use cases. So there is unstructured files. There's also archive. More recently, it's become really popular for backup data as folks strive to be able to recover quicker. Anthony did a really cool exercise this year where we were able to determine that a hybrid Qumulo environment could actually generate more throughput than some of the really expensive all-flash solutions out there. So we've had a lot of success there. We have a lot of customers that use it for video surveillance. We even have some really cool use cases. Some folks will use the all NVMe nodes for AI and genomics. We've had customers actually use their software version of Qumulo out in the public cloud and do really cool things like move workloads out there and let a large number of CPUs or GPUs transform that data so they can pull it back on-prem. And of course, the reason all of this is important is I've never met a customer that wants more products in their data center, right? So when you have a product like Qumulo, what I affectionately call a Swiss Army knife that can do so many things, that has really consistent performance and really great customer support, it's just a recipe for success. And we've seen it time and time again, and that's why we're such big fans of Qumulo. So with that, Kyle, hopefully I didn't steal too much of your thunder. I'm ready for you to take over.
Okay, no, Brian, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. My goal here is to give a little bit of insight to Qumulo if you've not heard from of us. And if you have, maybe a little bit, refresher, as well as a little bit about where we're going. And really do appreciate Eagle, setting this up for us. And we'll talk at the end about some of our co-customers and success stories that we have. So who is Qumulo? This is our vision statement, and there's some lofty words in this: empowering customers to store, manage, and curate their data anywhere and forever. When we talk about data here, we're talking about unstructured file data, not block data. Block data is really reserved or primarily for databases, virtual infrastructures. Our entire goal at Qumulo is to look at unstructured file data. So you can think of NFS, SMB, and S3 type of workloads. So how do we manage that? How do we store it? Anywhere and forever. Again, pretty lofty words, but anywhere is, we know data exists in multiple places within an organization, right? We could be at the edge in your data center, in a cloud. The data is created in one place and needs to be someplace else for a business to get the ultimate value out of that data. How do we do that responsibly and economically, as well as simply, right? We don't want to put a huge burden on customers or have you manage multiple tools or applications on top of your data to make that movement and forever. I was data domain customer number 2 in the state of Texas like 15 years ago. I went and looked, and the president of that company was making a tour, and we met him, and he said tape is dead. Tape still exists, right? And it will probably for some time. But what's happening is, because of the density and the economics of spinning media, you can keep backup data readily available for a fraction of the cost that you used to be able to do in the past. And that's just getting better and better. And that data is becoming valuable from compliance and legal reasons, as well as business value reasons. So how do we give you as many capabilities as we can to decide what data, can sit on a disk somewhere at a good economical price versus going off to tape or some other media? When we talk about file data, this is the data that's really exploding. So this stat where 80% of the world's data is unstructured and growing exponentially faster than block data. And it's because of where these sources of data are coming from. And here's, I've got a few examples here. So media and entertainment, just think about all the video creation that's happening, the streaming, whether it's commercial streaming and production, everybody's phones, we're storing everything, we're keeping it forever. The interesting thing, I'm not sure if anyone saw the Sphere that went live in Las Vegas, I think last week, 2 weeks ago. And it's this giant Sphere building, and it's got screens all along the outside of it as well as internally, and they're going to have concerts and shows. It's really state of the art, and they had to develop technology in order to accomplish this. And Qumulo is a partner with them in doing this, and that's actually going to be 16K video. That's how defined and how large these files are. Like I said, new technology had to be developed while they did this, and how they edit this video. It's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, just look it up. Healthcare, fax imaging, any kind of X-rays, MRIs. The definition of that is getting more detailed, which means larger images or larger size capacity, more images. And doctors are asking that those images be available for the lifetime of the patient. That's a tremendous amount to manage, as well as to keep, again, available someplace that they can access it. May not be the real-time access that they need for something that there's, some images they took last week, but how can it be available and they have to pull those up that may be several months or years old? Video surveillance, cameras everywhere. Think of ISDs, think of large corporations, campuses, universities. These, again, the quality of this video is getting more and more. And backup and archive, we've hit that already, but backup archive data is not slowing down either. Usually compliance and legal reasons, but as well as customers are figuring out how to tap value out of that data that may be old, looking at trends or anomalies for the long haul. Give a quick glimpse here of our architecture. Since Brian, you mentioned it, I decided to go ahead and talk about this a little bit. We are a distributed-based, node-based file system. So we start with a minimum of 4 nodes. Those nodes look like a server, right? Regular AMD or Intel CPUs, RAM, some kind of media. We'll always have a little bit of NVMe in that, even our hybrid nodes for our cache. And we form a cluster. It's a single namespace. As we add nodes, that namespace just keeps getting larger and larger. From an administrative standpoint, there's nothing to do when you add nodes aside from plugging it in. We already have an IP address pool, and you say expand cluster. There's no balancing out of any volumes or anything. We'll take care of restriping that data in the background. Our file system consists of 4K blocks. So when we talk about promoting and demoting things out of our cache, we're doing that in 4K chunks. So we don't have to promote an entire file. We don't have to demote an entire file. We're looking at it in 4K chunks. And this is really created, to Brian's point about most of the customers are hybrid customers, really efficient at that algorithm where we're getting higher than 75% read hits on our cache. And that's because we can prefetch and we understand these patterns. And most of the use cases are going to be fine with that setup. We have NFS SMB, we've added S3, everything in our system is REST API oriented. And then along the bottom here, these are kind of the platforms that we support today. So we have a number of hardware platforms for things that go in your data center. We have our product in all 3 public clouds, and probably early next year, maybe even late this year, we'll be ready with our virtual appliance. where we talk about our edge, kind of our edge use case. The unique thing about Qumulo, I think, in this instance is that it's the same product, right? No matter what hardware platform, no matter which cloud, it is the same feature functionality. We're not a little bit different. We're not a lot different. It's the same. So when we come out with a new feature in the software, it's going to come out whether you're running our software in the data center or in one of the clouds, and you'll see it. It looks and feels exactly the same. So I think that's a little bit unique that we have.
Hey, Kyle, someone asked a question.
Yes.
I know you guys can scale to exabytes, but some
Yes.
folks were wondering, what's the entry point? What's the smallest physical cluster you can buy in an on-prem data center?
So the smallest I think we have is around, if you think about 80 to 90, maybe even 100 terabyte entry, that's kind of where the sweet spot, I'd say about 80 is the smallest. That's where the virtual machine, I think we're going to see things smaller than that. But I'd say physical right now, it's in the 80 range.
Yeah, and that's in a hybrid setup. The all flash can get even smaller, about
And
15
smaller,
terabytes.
yes.
Yeah. Depending on the use case, yep.
And in the cloud, it's like 10 terabytes, right? It's you can start very small. Okay. We are a software-based solution. So we have, like I talked about within the nodes, there's nothing specialized. There's no NVRAM, there's no server class memory. We ride on just regular nodes. We do certify those nodes to make sure that we can get predictability and performance, as well as supportability, but there's nothing unique about that. And since all of our intelligence is in software, we have been able to really make the product, the product will just get better over time. So if you purchase, Qumulo back in 2019, 2020, we did not have software-based encryption. We do now. If you purchased back then, you didn't have S3, and we came out with S3 at the end of last year. You did a regular software upgrade. S3's there now as a first-class protocol in our system. And we also make, obviously, performance, and that algorithm I talked about just gets better over time. So when you go through your upgrades, your investment is getting better. I'll talk about something we did earlier this year at the end here, where we're talking about we're actually giving something back to the customer if they've been with us for a while, and their cluster can get more efficient over time as well. The other thing to think here is about our updates. So we send out, we do updates twice a month, software updates. You do not have to upgrade, every time you get a new release. Like I said, my history was on a customer side as well, and I was always an N-1 or N-2 philosophy on where I wanted to be on my updates. But the update process has also gotten a lot easier. You can see it kind of in the 2020 timeframe where we've changed that. So if you're doing a software only upgrade, it'll take less than a minute to get your entire cluster updated to the latest software. If we're doing a platform upgrade or some kind of kernel upgrade, then we'll do a rolling reboot, and it'll go through your nodes. And obviously, the larger the cluster, the more time it will take. But we try to be as non-disruptive as possible. It's really very simple. Once you see the update done once or twice with our customer success group, customers just go ahead and do it on their own after that.
Yeah, and Kyle, I'll back up what you say. I think the one question I always get from customers is, do I have to apply all these updates?
Yeah.
and you already covered it. The answer is no, but it's a testament to your innovation. And I believe you guys use something called the Agile programming methodology. But the one thing I wanted to shout out is how consistent you guys are through that whole process and how you don't introduce bugs. I honestly don't know how you do it, because I have vendors that release something every 6 months and it's baked full of issues. So yet another reason why customers are happy with your product.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brian. The other thing is it's fairly easy for us when we do find a bug, right, to get that fixed pretty quickly and notified of people. Obviously every one of these releases has release notes with it, so you can see what's in it. And if you only upgrade once a quarter, right? Or some periodic, we have roll-ups, right? So you don't have to provide, you don't have to do every single 2-week upgrade. You can do a quarterly roll-up, and you'll catch you up to whatever that latest is. We think about that, but yeah, it's that release cycle. You're right, can look intimidating at times, but you certainly don't have to upgrade every time a release comes out. But knowing that we have you covered if you're something less than that. So I'm going to back up a little bit, or take a step back and kind of look at what's happening in this industry, right? We see that the unstructured data is growing. It is becoming, you have to look at the management of it, the management at scale. So how do we deal with all this growth, knowing that, almost every business, no matter what, there are some of those things that hit everybody, right? Upper VSS. How do I manage this as I grow? Because I don't want to necessarily have a burden to my administrators. I don't want to keep adding other silos of storage. I just want it to grow and be an easy process for me. So that's top of mind for us. The data spread. We know that we all have, usually traditional data centers where most of my data is, but I can have things in the cloud. Certainly is playing a role here. And how do I manage that? The cloud, all the cloud providers have their own native file services, right, that they offer. But those services are usually, it's hard to move data out of them. That's a migration or some other third-party tool that now I need to move data back and forth to these native services. I get very little visibility out of these services. So, and it's another thing I have to go learn, right? The geo dispersion. So, a couple of weeks ago, I was taking a trip and I rented a car from Hertz, and it gave me a Tesla. And I had never driven a Tesla before. So I called my buddy how to get started, because if anybody's never done that before, it's not like a regular car at all. And so I get started, and it was a great experience. And you can see, I'm sure everyone has seen like the pictures, that it's tracking, all the sensors around are tracking, all the cameras around are tracking at all times. Well, went back and looked at this because I was curious, and Tesla says that every car, depending obviously how far you're driving, how long you're driving, in urban areas, this is a lot higher than if you're just driving on a highway. But every car can generate between like 400 terabytes to 4 petabytes of data a year, just by gathering all that data. But that's sitting in the car. So how do I move that data? How do I move at least a summary of that data someplace else, right? And that's an extreme example maybe, but I come from an oil and gas background, and they've got rigs in the West Texas, or they have we had a marine fleet in the ocean that was pulling sensor information that we needed to get back. So how do we help with that edge problem where data is everywhere, and now workflows are dependent on data being generated in one place and analyzed someplace else? And we know that cloud's going to play a role, right? Cloud's not going away. It is just, I think people are getting a little bit smarter as they use the cloud. I think 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't uncommon to hear very large companies saying, hey, I've got this initiative, 30% of my workloads got to go to the cloud, and I don't have a time to go re-architect anything, so I'm lifting and shifting. And then they got a bill, and they started bringing stuff back. So I think people are in a mode now where we're thinking about that, right? How do I do this in a cost-effective manner that's really going to still provide the value to the company? And we believe in this, right? Buy the base and rent the peak. So buy what you need to run your business. And if you need a burst, or if you need a peak, or if Brian mentioned, I need to go run some analysis on some data, but I don't do this all the time, the public cloud's a great use case for that. Move my data up, run my analysis, get my results, and then just poof the data. I don't want to copy it back necessarily, because I'm going to incur charges. So again, these are all the things we're thinking about. And I say that as we talk a little bit about roadmap and where we're going here. So these items were released over the last 6 months, and again, these are just coming out through software upgrades. And the first one is what I'll stop for a second and talk about. So adaptive data protection is our ability to take existing clusters and restrike data across that cluster. So if a cluster started with 4 nodes and I've got 1 node protection and that cluster has grown now considerably, like to 12 nodes, 15 nodes, you name it. We had a customer in Dallas that started with 6 nodes. They're now at 20. And they wanted to go to a higher level of protection on their cluster, as well as we can restripe that data. So the larger the cluster, the more efficient we can be with writing the data out. So by adding that 20, when they added the 20th node, we ran this ADP process in the background. Customer support will help you get it kick-started, but after that, it just happens in the background. There's nothing to do from an admin standpoint. And they gained 20% more capacity on that cluster than they had before, just by restriping that data. And again, this is, there's no, it just comes in the software. There's no fee for it. And now they have more efficient cluster. They have more storage that they had the day before. So we're really proud of that, that we got that out in the release, as well as a transparent hardware refresh. So we have customers that are getting to the point where their hardware needs to be refreshed. So if they add a new node, they can remove an old node. Again, no forklift migration. We're just going to do a waterfall with new nodes and old nodes and removing them. And the new nodes, some of them are much more dense than the old nodes, as you can imagine. So I can add 1 node and remove 2 nodes and still have the same capacity. So that's all baked into the product now. So looking forward, though, we've got a couple of things on tap for the quarter. A big one is for us is multi-AD, multi-tenancy. As well as we're improving our S3 stack and making some enhancements on that and increasing our platforms. So we could have a whole session on platforms and how we're qualifying and things there. I'm not going to go too far into that. The more exciting thing, I think, is what we're shooting for Q4. And this is where Brian said I'm going to be a little vague with this. But our cloud product today, like I said, it's available in all 3 public clouds. It's the same look and feel. It's the same product that you can run in your data center. And you can replicate to any cloud back and forth. That's all there today. But what we're looking at for the cloud product is 2 things. One is to be able, since it's in the cloud and you have all this available infrastructure there, we're looking at a way, and we'll introduce that you can dial up and down performance on any storage. And you can obviously dial capacity as well. So think of if one of the use cases we talked about is DR to the cloud, where I want replication, I want my data replicated up there, and I want a very, very small performance in front of it because really I'm just writing new data. But if I need to do a DR test, or heaven forbid, I need to do a DR scenario, I can increase the performance on that data and start my DR process very quickly. The other thing that it's going to do is give us, we think we have really good economics on that cloud product now, and that's just going to get better, right? So it will be something to consider as you're mapping out or as you think about where your data needs to be. We're going to give you a very good economic play for being in the cloud, even though it's in the cloud. Nexus is going to be our managers. So it will look at multiple clusters in your environment. It will be able to get all this performance data. So Brian had a couple of pictures. We're not set to do a demo today, but one of the really great features that Qumulo gives you are these real-time analytics. And if you look at how you can look at a screen and instantly see who's touching what data, what IP address are they coming from, what files are being accessed, and it's all done in real time. Again, this is something that you're not going to see, especially in legacy products where that's an off-box operation that happens sometime hours, maybe days later. All this is in real time. But all that summary data and capacity will come up to our Nexus product, as well as you'll be able to do some management functions centrally, which a lot of customers are asking for. So that first release will be done later this year. And then, we are a single namespace within a cluster that can grow. I think our largest customer is at 38 petabytes in production, all one single namespace. But as I talked about, we understand that there's pockets of data in your organization. How can I help you with other namespace, extending that namespace, not just to a cluster, but to many clusters. So this is kind of our vision for the next 6 months. We're going to have some exciting announcements in early November around this, and we will have some of this released actually at the same time this year. So we're really excited about where this is going.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you guys are picking up the pace.
Yeah, we are. It's, I think the way I look at it and the way I answer this with people is COVID did a lot of things, right, to many different people and companies. And I think you can look at Qumulo and definitely see an increase in our innovation. Like we were doing a lot of things, like I talked about, making sure that we had a good, stable product with all the features that our customers are asking for. And now we're taking this time, and I think we're going to move to the innovation line, which is really exciting for us to see.
Yeah, and you've got customer stories up here. Yeah. Oh, sorry,
Yes.
Kyle. I'm trying to steal your thunder again. Yeah, I was just going to point out that another thing that Anthony and I talked about yesterday is we affectionately call it the nimble effect. But we remember back how we spent years explaining to people why the nimble architecture was so great. And eventually we got so many customers that we didn't have to do as much work as we used to, right? And you guys are hitting that critical mass here in the Midwest where we've had a lot of success. You guys have had success on your own. And this is a good example of that. Anthony, you probably have something to add because you worked with Qumulo to architect both of these solutions. But it's just another great example of how it's getting easier to talk Qumulo because people can turn left or right at the average trade show and find a Qumulo customer.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, and these are two completely different use cases. So Blue Valley, we actually were utilizing them as a repository for the camera system for Avigilon. And Avigilon had a process where they're like, no, you have to use local devices, basically VMs that are your DVR, and they did not want to write to a centralized NAS. And Tyler, the customer's like, yeah, I'll make it work, and has seen wonderful success, especially with the performance of it. And so did a case study with Qumulo to kind of share that news. And then the other one's Children's Hospital, and this is really where we started seeing a lot of success with Qumulo. They can do so much performance, so much throughput, even in their hybrid nodes, that it almost seems like a crime that we put them as a backup target. But what it allowed us to do was architect Commvault differently as well to really give a good solution from a backup as well as a restore perspective, as well as an offsite copy. And so now what we're doing in a lot of situations is when refreshes come up for Commvault infrastructure is wanting to look at putting Qumulo in place as the target for backup. It allows us to scale media agents independently. So when you need backup performance from a throughput perspective, from a streams perspective, we can scale the media agents and put just what you need there. And then in the backup space, if you need more capacity, we can easily add a node to the cluster. And that node, since they scale wide, adds performance from an IOPS perspective and a throughput perspective. And what's cool is what we see with Qumulo as a backup target is we have it where most people are like, what do I do in a mass restore? My whole environment goes down. What do I do? And they think they need all flash as a target, to run the workloads in that type of scenario or to mass recover and get everything back to production where things are being protected again. They're not running in some type of degraded state. And Qumulo Hybrid has been a great fit for this because we can deliver 100,000 IOPS. They're fronted by the media agents that are actually serving as an additional read cache to boot the VMs. And then the throughput that we can get off of this cluster, the bottleneck actually shifts to the primary SAN even though it's an all flash SAN, the primary SAN is the bottleneck and from a mass recovery operation, because we can deliver so much performance off of a 4-node hybrid Qumulo cluster. And so it's been really interesting to see how we can do that. And then also their continuous replication allows us to utilize Qumulo's replication in the background, but both sites can do recoveries. Both sites can be doing backups, and both sites have the data from the other sites almost instantaneously. So it's been really nice just being able to remove some barriers that we had in architecture, and Qumulo has been a great fit for that. So for us, it's become a Swiss Army knife. And then to Brian's point, when you get it into your environment, you start putting more and more workloads on it, going, oh, I can move this over there. That'd be convenient. And so we've seen that as well.
Yeah, and Anthony, maybe you already said this, but just in case, I would add that what was great with Blue Valley is that Avigilon selfishly wants to sell their own hardware, and it was awesome that Tyler saw the value to having that single namespace and push that through. And he was so happy he wanted the case study done so he could help other customers.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, and I think I don't think I talked about this. I appreciate you guys saying that. And if anybody from Blue Valley or Children's is on, thank you, because case studies for us are huge. Just like it was said, right? Sometimes customers or most of the time, customers are better at convincing other customers, right? Because they live in those shoes. The other thing I didn't mention though was that of those licensing of the features and functionality I talked about, like S3 being introduced and some other things that we did, there's no extra licensing involved. So we basically have the general purpose or hybrid archive, hybrid license tier, and we have a all flash license tier, but all of the features that you saw there are included in both. So everyone's platinum. We come out with a feature and it's just a matter of an update, not another SKU or something to go talk about there. Okay. Listen, this, I think this is my last slide. It is. And just to, reinforce, right? Qumulo is not the best at marketing, and we spend our money elsewhere, obviously, but we are 5 years in a row as the leader quadrant for Gartner in this space. I'm sure you've heard of all the other people in that quadrant. They're all name brands that have been around for a long time. Qumulo, we've been shipping product, I think, for 8 years now. And it's extremely solid. I think not only have we proven what the product can do, but they're really liking that vision that we kind of touched on and where we're going with our solution. Listen, these guys, Brian did a great job of talking about customer success with Slack. It is a model that I was not familiar with before coming here, but it works, and it works because I think we're committed to it internally, and the customers, it just removes all the friction when you just have a question to ask, or when you're curious about something and you need help, you're not sure about how to set permissions or something like that. It doesn't have to go through a phone call or triage or anything. You're actually talking to people that can help you.
Well, and I think that's huge because it removes I call it a fear, but it removes that fear of reaching out to support. It's so much quicker to post a quick question in a Slack channel, because that's what people are used to, chatting via Teams, Slack, and asking a peer a question. And so it follows that model versus having to pick up the phone, try to call somebody. It may not be a good experience. And so what they tend to do is, I'm going to go Google it. I'm going to figure this out on my own. And you think about all the time that's wasted trying to find an answer versus just posting in Slack, and within a minute or two, you're getting an answer from an expert. And so it really frees you guys up to do valuable things instead of trying to research something that, is just going to consume a lot of time. Yeah.
And I'll say, and you may have touched on this already, but I think, it's worth reiterating. Your account team is in this channel, Eagle's in this channel, and we've got, just a number of people internally at Qumulo that monitor those channels, and even higher ups that, if they get called in. So, if something goes wrong, we've got eyes on it right away, that we know how to attack the problem.